good morning, Miramar, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Tamara G. Don't forget to check us out on all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at City of Miramar. That's Miramar. And with us today, we actually have a repeat visitor, a repeat guest, because she was so great the last time. And she talks all about caregiving and particularly dealing with senior parents. And she's going to be talking with us today about talking to your parents about senior care. It is Jennifer Fitzpatrick. She's been featured on CBS, NBC, Fox News, ABC, healthcare experience expert, and she's also the best-selling author of Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One. So welcome back to the show, Jennifer. So happy to see you.
Thank you, Tamara. It's great to see you too.
And listen, I am sure that you have been so busy in the last year and a half because with the pandemic, you found that more people were actually taking care, not just of senior care, but just of everybody in their families, right?
Yeah, and not just, honestly, Tamara, not just physical issues, but there's been a lot of mental health toll that this situation has taken on everybody. So that's another type of caregiving that a lot of people are having to help out their loved ones with.
Right. Okay. So we had the pandemic. We have, of course, just the usual, your parents are older. We're that sandwich generation. I think a lot of us find ourselves taking care of kids on one side and then parents on the other. So how do you have that conversation with your parents about senior care? Because most of them, they don't want to come live with you and they don't want to go live in assisted living.
Well, I think it's so important to focus on what exactly precisely are your concerns. So if your parent has fallen a few times, maybe mention that. Or if they've had a bunch of fender benders, talk to them about that. Or maybe they've had a new diagnosis. So make it really specific. Don't make it just, oh, you're getting old, so we need to talk. If there's something, because just the fact that they're getting older, that's really not any reason for you to step in and take over. But you want to make sure that you're clear, like, what are your concerns, and have some ideas of where you want the conversation to go.
Okay. But now, there are always those parents, Jennifer, that they will be the parents until the day that they die, and you cannot come to them and discuss anything with them. How do you deal with those parents?
Well, first, you always want to remember that, and this can be really hard for adult kids, your parent is a grown-up. And unless he or she has advanced dementia, Alzheimer's or Lewy body, where he or she truly can't make decisions, it really is up to them if they want to listen to you. And so you've got to work on finessing your message and being respectful and giving specific examples and sharing what your concerns are. Sometimes I think, though, we go into these conversations assuming that he or she won't like it or they don't want to talk to us. Sometimes the parent really does. It's been on their mind also, especially, like you said, after everything that's gone on the last 18 months. So don't go in assuming that they're going to shut you down, because a lot of times they want to talk to you too. It's been on their mind.
Okay. So when we talk about the senior care, you have, some of the elderly care facilities, you have assisted living, you have independent living, you have nursing homes. How do people, you have retirement communities. How do people determine which one is right for their parents?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. If you work with a care manager, if you go to caremanager.org, you can hire somebody, a nurse or a social worker, somebody that can guide you through that process of figuring out exactly what your loved one or you need. Some older adults, they hire that person outright. Also, your local area agency on aging is often able to provide some type of assessment. So if you go to n4a.org, N as in Nancy 4a.org, that's another really terrific group that can sometimes provide that kind of service. Now, that's a little trickier right now because some of them are open and not. Some of them are providing in-home right now. Some of them are. There can be wait lists. So hiring a private person a lot of times is good. There's also placement services out there like Oasis Senior Advisors and groups like that. They actually get a commission from the community but you, the family member and the older person, don't pay anything. So there are some services like that out there as well.
Okay. If you're just tuning in to Good Morning Miramar, first of all, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Tamara G. And with us, we have Jennifer Fitzpatrick. She is the best-selling author of Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One. And she's back to talk with us. We had her on about a year or so ago, talking to your parents about senior care today. And this is very important because is there a certain age, Jennifer, that, adult kids should be thinking about moving their parents into senior care? I mean, is there like a cutoff by 70, by 80, by 90, by 65, because I think a lot of people are like, well, when should
it's
we start
interesting.
having them?
Yeah, I think that it should be an ongoing dialogue. And I think once somebody is around 60, it's a good idea for the adult kids to start having those conversations. And I don't think it's ever too early though, because planning, finances, looking at just having conversations when you see a natural opening. For example, maybe a neighbor has gone into the hospital or moved to assisted living and it's in your parents' age group. It's a natural opening. Well, what do you think of that? If you ever needed care, would you want to live with me? Would you want to hire an aide to come in? Would you want to move to a senior living? What is the financial situation like? Is there long-term care insurance? And that's the really tough part, because a lot of adult kids, when they get in there, it's during a crisis and they don't have any idea of what the financial picture is. And so I understand if a parent they're private, they don't want to share everything, but even if they can give ballpark, like, okay, I do have long-term care insurance, or, I have about X amount, saved or in my pension or what have you, that can really help. Because in a lot of families, what winds up happening is the adult kids, they start to feel like, okay, am I going to have to pay for this? Are we going to have to pool our money if we need help? So I think it really, a lot of times the adult child, it really is relevant for them to ask those financial questions. So for any older adults who, if you've had an adult child talk to you about that, most of the time it's really because they're just trying to team up with you to make sure you get the care that you want.
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought up, Jennifer, about, the kids trying to have that discussion with their parents. However, as someone who has never been married and doesn't have kids, I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I'm like, what am I going to do when I turn 80, or who's going to be there to take care of me? Like, what should I be doing to prepare for that?
So I'm going to go ahead and promote a different book that's not mine. There's a book by Joy Laverty called Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old? And it's really a terrific book. And she goes through all of that, because I'm actually I'm married, but I don't have kids either, Tamara. So I know what you're talking about, but she talks about strategies that you can do, that, making friends in different generations, not just having friends in your own age group. It keeps you young, but it also, you have friends in a network of people that might be able to help out and pitch in, people in your faith community, people in your neighborhood. So I actually am going to ahead and say I would read Joy Laverty's book. It's a really good book. She's a great person too.
Okay, sounds good. Now, you talked a little bit earlier as well about long-term, I guess, healthcare insurance. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I know that the last several advisors I've had, they've asked me about that, and I didn't know what to do. So I didn't do anything, but what should I do?
I'm really glad that your financial professional is working and at least bringing up the subject. So a long-term care insurance policy can cover a number of different services. It sometimes can cover home care if you need an aide in your home. It could assisted living, nursing home care. Remember that, especially if you need anything that's called custodial care long-term, like you need assisted living, you need a nursing home, you need a home care aide, all of that is very expensive. And different policies cover different types of services and for different lengths of time. But I think it's an important thing for everybody to consider just get a quote and see what it costs and see what it covers. Because, and I think the other thing that a lot of people need to know is sometimes we assume that we're too old. But there are, and I don't want to speak out of turn because this really is a question for a financial professional or somebody that sells these policies. But sometimes people are still eligible as they are in the aging process if they're not very ill. So it can vary. It's going to be more expensive,
Right.
but I would just say get a quote and think about it. Talk about the pros and cons with your financial professional.
Okay, sounds good. So back to talking about that care for these senior parents and how you're gonna talk to them about, well, this is what we're gonna do next, or maybe we should do this, or do you suggest come in guns a blazing and like, look, mom, you've fallen 5 times. There's nobody here to watch you. You're gonna have to move. I'm sure that's probably not going to sit well with that parent.
It's not a good strategy. So I think you start, first of all, if there's a crisis, person lands in the hospital, they have all kinds of problems wrong with them. The doctor and everybody's saying, gosh, there's no way he or she can care for themselves. You're going to probably have to take a little bit more of an authoritarian tone.
Mhm.
But really, ultimately, that person, if they don't have advanced dementia, they can say, doc, I don't care what you say. Daughter, I don't care what you say. I'm going home. Now, they're going to suffer consequences.
Mhm.
So you have to always approach the conversation with respect, treat your loved one with dignity. You're going to get mad sometimes because sometimes if they're not listening to reason, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to get upset. I would also say consider different people in the family approaching. The other thing is to keep in mind that in a lot of cases, the person that is emotionally and or geographically closest to the loved one sometimes is not the best person to have the conversation. There's too much intimacy or maybe not as much objectivity. Maybe it's the brother in Texas that could have that conversation and it's going to go a little bit better.
Okay.
So because they don't see him every day or they don't talk to him all the time. And it's funny because that does wind up being the case a lot. And that primary family member that's always there, always running mom to the doctor, always doing the grocery shopping, they get really offended. Why would she listen to this brother of mine and not me? But sometimes it's just another perspective. So be respectful. Know that ultimately it's their choice. However, something that you want to integrate into these conversations is letting them know your boundaries. So mom, okay, you can go back home from the hospital, but I can't be over there every day.
Mhm.
I can only visit you twice a week, or I can only drop off meals once a week. I'm not going to be able to, because what a lot of times, the reason that a lot of older loved ones say, I don't need any help. I don't need an aid. I don't need to go to a senior living community is because they just make the assumption that, well, if I refuse, everyone will cater
Come to me.
me.
Exactly.
And a lot of adult kids will do that, but then it's a recipe for burnout. And, again, if it's a short term, I remember when my grandmother broke both of her shoulders, this is over 20 years ago, and my 3 aunts and I, for 4 weeks, she was going to be immobilized. So my aunts and I took turns at her house. It was fine. It was for 4 weeks. We knew it was going to end. But for a lot of times, if someone has a chronic condition or it's going to be years of care, people can't sustain that indefinitely, even if it's divided up around, between 4 people. So be clear when that loved one says, nope, I'm not letting strangers into my house, then okay, I understand that. But please know that these are the limits. We're not going to be able to sleep over every night. We're not going to be able to be there every single day when you wake up in the morning to help you get out of bed. So we're going to have to figure out a plan. And Tamara, this might sound really kind of like tough love, but sometimes it can be effective to let the person fail. If they don't want help, if they're saying, nope, I'm not going to let people in my house. Nope, I'm not going to go anywhere else. I want to live here. Then maybe give them the space to try it and fail. And that they're going to find that, I can't do this anymore.
Right. Well, and here's the other thing. What is it about not letting people in your house? Like I have heard that from more of my friends' parents. Oh no, I'm not gonna let anybody. Why not? Let them come in and help you. If you have a home health aide that can come in and bathe you and change your sheets and clean your house or whatever, why would you not let them come in? I don't know.
Well,
It's the
it's
mental
like
health thing.
having a personal assistant in a
Right,
lot of ways.
right.
And but the media sometimes will, when there's a story about someone being scammed and that happens, that
Yes.
an aide could, but statistically, the person that's most likely to steal from you is a family member or a friend. It
Mhm.
is not an aide.
Right.
Statistically, it's someone that is close to you. So you got to do risk benefit analysis. I mean, could this person, but one of the ways that you can manage that risk is going through an agency that is licensed and bonded. What I see happen so frequently is people want to save a few bucks and they say, well, I have a neighbor who has a granddaughter and she'll just come over. And sometimes it works out great, but a lot of times it really doesn't, because there's no one overseeing the care.
And they
There's
do
no one,
absolutely
she's not
nothing.
getting training.
Right.
Right. And sometimes it can work out, Tamara. Sometimes it does, but more often than not, I just go to an agency, because think about it. What about when that granddaughter goes back to school or maybe finds a different job? When you work with a reputable licensed home care agency, what you're finding is that that person is, if they're sick, if they have an emergency, the agency often is going to be able to send a replacement.
Right.
And so, and there's repercussions if something bad does happen, if something goes terribly wrong. A nurse is supervising that aide. They're going to make visits to check in. How's it going? What's the chemistry like? So that's the way you can really mitigate risk.
Okay. If you're just tuning in to the show, we are speaking with Jennifer L. Fitzpatrick. She has her master's of social work, and she's the founder of Generations Health Education. Jennifer has been around a long time dealing with healthcare and the aging. We're talking to her today about talking to your parents about senior care. And I wanted to ask you something, Jennifer, because it does seem, obviously, with all the advancements in medicine, you've been in the healthcare field for more than 20 plus years. We are living longer. We are going to be around for a long time. So this is obviously a conversation that children should have with their senior parents.
We need to, and it's really, it takes, I talk about it in Cruising Through Caregiving. I know a lot of people say it takes a village. I say it takes a crew, like a caregiving crew. You need a captain, maybe a spouse, maybe a daughter. Then you need first mates. It needs, and that's the thing, the adult kid needs to know, it shouldn't just be you. You need to have a team in place. But having these conversations is so crucial. And you might have to have the conversation 3 times, 5 times. Different people might need to get involved. And sometimes, and this is the sad thing I always like to tell folks in these sorts of interviews, is sometimes they're not going to listen, and there really is going to be a crisis, and they're going to have less choices. And I think that that's what really can be a motivating sentence for a lot of these conversations is, Dad, I don't want it to be, you're at the hospital, we have to find some help for you. You've had a stroke, or, you can't even participate in discussing what you want. It's a way to empower you. And I think that that's what's so scary for a lot of people is they don't want to be robbed of their power. They want to make sure that they're in charge of their life. And a lot of people just assume if you're home and there's nobody in your home, then you've got more control. But really the opposite is true, is if you make the choices to keep yourself independent. I see all the time people go to senior living communities and they perk up, they thrive, they're eating better, they're exercising, they're socializing. And so it doesn't have to be this awful thing. And I'm not going to say it's right for everybody. There's no right way to age, and there's no right way to be a family caregiver. There's lots of good ways to do both.
I love that. So now tell us, Jennifer, how can some of these facilities, because as you mentioned, there have been stories all in the news and things that have happened. How can they change the stigma that often surrounds them? Because, the first thing a lot of elderly people think is if you mention nursing home, then you're basically sending me off to die, or you're going to forget about me, or you're not going to come, with me, or I'm not going to get the care that I need. So or even assisted living or independent living, how can they get rid of that stigma?
I think a lot of that just has to do with it's generational. So people in our age group, we're more open a little bit because I think we've seen there's so many options.
Mhm.
A lot of the traditionalists, and I think baby boomers, Gen Xers, we're a little more open-minded because we see that we've visited people with, oh, wow, this is really cool. This is like a college campus.
Right.
But I think a lot of the oldest folks maybe never have been to any place but a nursing home. And they think, oh, well, I saw my grandmother die in one of those places and it was awful. And so maybe if they go look and just have a little bit of an open mind and say, you're not committing to anything. Go have lunch.
Mhm.
Go to an event that the community is having. They have all kinds of events with speakers and dancing, and just go make an appointment and talk to the other residents. And you're probably going to see people that you think, oh, they look like me. They have similar interest to me. They're not just sitting in the corner doing nothing.
Right.
Now, that said, you might visit somewhere where that's happening and you want to cross that place off your list.
You're like, nope, that's
But
not
for the
me.
most part, you're
Right.
going to see really vibrant situations
Mhm.
when you go visit some communities that are in your geographic area. The big thing before visiting, definitely look at your budget. Don't fall in love. I always joke, you don't want to try on a piece of jewelry that's like 10 times more than your budget can afford, or a dress that's 10 times more than you can afford. Try on stuff that's in your price range. So don't go visit the $1 zillion community if you only have a $10,000 a month budget.
Sounds good. Well, listen, where can people find your book? Because I know it's a bestseller. So where can they find it?
cruisingthroughcaregiving.com, and you can get first chapter and all the worksheets. There's a worksheet on determining if you're in martyr syndrome, how to assemble a caregiving crew. There's, I think, 7 worksheets. They're all free. You can download them on the Cruising Through Caregiving website, but also anywhere books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all those good spots.
All right. Sounds good. So it sounds like people should have this conversation with their parents, talking to your parents about senior care. And as you mentioned, having it sooner than later so that you can have choices right now versus where you may end up because of whatever the circumstances may happen.
Definitely. And if you are out there and you're over 60 and you've got adult kids or nieces, nephews, whoever the younger generation is in your family, maybe you talk to them, tell them that you're open to having the conversation, and they might be nervous to talk to you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you so very much, Jennifer Fitzpatrick. We've been talking to your parents about senior care. Of course, she's been featured all over television, CBS, NBC, Fox News, ABC Healthcare Experience Expert. She's also the best-selling author of Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One. You can find it online, anywhere books are sold if you would like more information. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and for the helpful tips, because like I said, I think everybody is kind of going through this now, particularly through this pandemic and with the sandwich generation of having to take care of kids on the left side and then having to take care of an older parent on the right side. So thank you very much for being with us today. And we certainly
Thanks so much, Tamara.
Okay, looking forward to seeing you again.
Me too. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for watching Good Morning Miramar. Until the next time, I'm your host, Tamara G. See ya.